Today I will show you the powers of the second praetor, Ginny Cataxias. He doesn't seem to be built strong, but his claws can run through space and time. He can keep brains alive without a body, he can break your mind, he has internet in a pool of brain juice, can create force fields and can make life without using reproductive organs. Or at least without organs that were made for reproduction. Let's look at the powers of Ginny Cataxias. As I said in Shielded's video, the praetor's powers are powers of influence. Jin shows how he expands on his knowledge and how he reduces yours, so that you can't memorize a single thing. This card also shows us that Jin sees completion as a process that's perhaps never finished. It should be continuous. Jin's obsession with knowledge means that he wants to keep other factions dumb. So he dislikes willpower because that could keep a mind sane against his powers. He actually likes Vorinclex for his goal to make most life mindless, but we'll see that he mostly despises the Green Praetor for his philosophy of eradicating consciousness as a whole. Jin prefers to take matters of change and the mind into his own claws, literally. So he looks into your mind, and whenever someone thinks, he changes their thoughts. Otherwise, he'll just break you down into a pool of useless flesh. He doesn't mind the mad, although they're beings to be discarded, they can be tools for Cataxias as well. He doesn't stop his experiments on you until you're mindless, or your mind is his. His Defiler from the same named cycle lets you draw cards. More importantly, Jin likes to use sphinxes. At first, these sphinxes escaped completion with their intellect, so it was deemed impossible to complete a sphinx. But Jin likes to do what's impossible, as we see here. All praetors are influenced by the Mirrodin moon of their color. Jin is influenced by the moon called the Eye of Doom. It used to influence the Lumen Grid by giving them insight and knowledge. Any being born under the Eye of Doom would be born with a higher intellect. If a goblin like Slowbat would be born under it, they would end up intelligent too. So, their tribe would kick any goblin born then out of their homes for their intellect. Slowbat was such a goblin, and it prompted him to adventure with Glissa as he valued friendship as much. Whenever someone looks into the light of doom, they see whatever has happened on Mirrodin. This freedom of knowledge should equalize intellect on the planet, but the Vodalken found ways to keep the knowledge to themselves. At the zenith of the moon, which is not a sun at all, the Vodalken come together to ponder deep questions. Here we see a moment where the Phyrexians started attacking, and the Vodalken used this time not to think about their origin, but to strategize against their enemies. A wise decision, but a hard one for the Vodalken, who used to only value new knowledge and brainstorming out about things like their origin. The Vodalken are all very wise, but they have massive weaknesses too. For one, their body is always weak as they value mind over matter. They also fail to have feelings and see others as test subjects, which disables them to feel any sort of sympathy. Ginny Cataxias is said to have brought knowledge for the first time. Of course, he took it upon himself to change the minds of creatures around him. It is very impressive for Jin to have attacked the Vodalken on their strongest hill, which is the mind. But he also had the promise of progress, to which no Vodalken could easily say no. Now the brightest minds of Mirrodin think for Phyrexia. Jin, like many, not all, other Phyrexians, doesn't feel sympathy. But he goes a little bit further than even Shieldred or Vorinclex. He is incapable of feeling for another, as that's not the dimension he thinks in. He only thinks about experiments and moving towards completion. When something strays from that path or obstructs it, they're used for progress in whatever way, or if they're lucky, they're disregarded. This is why he was perfect in taking over parts of Kamigawa's Reckoners. He did not have to feel for their members at all. One interesting project of Jin is taking the Blink Moth serum that would grant visions of perfect knowledge and turn it into a completed version. This would make you see perfect knowledge about Phyrexia and thus these ink moths would become the perfect propaganda machines. Jin has the power to distort space, so he can exile an artifact or creature by slashing through it. On Kamigawa, he used this to interact with pulling spirits out of the spirit world onto the material plane, a very specific power that turned out very useful on Kamigawa and in learning how to complete planeswalkers. More on that later. Otherwise, Jin is a perfect commander as he knows how to teleport his minions around the plane. This is not planeswalking of course, but it is still very useful. Jin has learned more from the Fadalken. Their harshest curse is that ideas will be discarded and will be repurposed. Free thought used to be very important to the Fadalken. Jin disregards just the free part and likes will as long as it's in his grasp. Ideas are very important to him, and he likes these force fields too. He has learned to make his own, and through his knowledge of them, he's learned to break through them as well. Of course using his massive claws for that. To Jin, mistakes are impossible. That's because completion is a progress, and every mistake is just a step towards it. But to learn from them, everything has to be recorded. So Jin has his minions write everything down meticulously, even to the point where some minions have only the ability to write and nothing else. This philosophy is also why the Phyrexian mode of Mirrodin Besieged lets you discard cards, ideas and mistakes until you have 15 artifacts in the junk pile, so that an opponent loses the game at every end step. Jin is pretty stuck in his ways and won't change very fast, but one time he did, which was after the first Sphinx was completed. That Sphinx is now the Chancellor of the Spires. This massive being was so puzzling that even the Fadalken did not dare to write about it. That's why the Sphinx mills you at first, and takes your spells later. What's puzzling to me is why flying is not on the top of the ability text. Jin believes in mind over matter. The Fadalken did this too, and their laws state that killing an idea without giving it enough thought is worse than murder of the body. Jin takes this idea and starts to hate on Vorinclex for being so focused on the body and making it stronger. To Jin, his need for natural evolution is triggering. Jin knows what Phyrexia needs, and any step that strays from that path is in fact imperfect to him. So Vorinclex, taking so many seemingly random steps, really angers our blue praetor. This one is a bit of a weird power, but Jin can survive when his body is cut in half. When the Wanderer sliced him, Jin just left the world and went back to recover. He's last seen helping change Ajani's body into a more perfect state. In fact, Jin's progress engine holds many brains captive and alive without a body, so that they can still think for the engine. This is actually a pretty perfect state of being to Jin, because there's the least amount of body and the most amount of thought per square meter. To the Fadalken, art is an unknown concept. This is because to them it serves no purpose. This sense of purpose translates to Gitaxias constantly working to his ideal state for Phyrexia. Everything that helps him to that goal is an ally, everything else is either an obstacle or doesn't exist to him. Jin works towards his goal by creating creatures from his vats. He doesn't mind the fact that they might not live, that's just another step towards perfection. What he does mind about is that he can control the input, so much so that he knows what the output will be eventually, so that he can eventually create his own vision of perfection. I wondered why Jin agreed to help Norn in completing a planeswalker. It seems like he did so that he would gain favor with the white aligned Praetor, who is definitely in the lead. But it might be that his vision for perfection needs planeswalkers as well. Perhaps a perfect creature needs all possible abilities. Jin is great at subterfuge. It's not sure whether he can do this himself, but he does have minions that can pass through solid metal, which is a very useful tool against other Praetors. His drones and minions even sing about these other minions in thanks because they give them so much knowledge about their enemies. The Nurok, which are the blue-aligned human faction of Phyrexia, use a spy network too. As they are under Jin, you can be pretty sure that he took their ability to turn invisible. Jin must have the most information about other Praetors of them all, perhaps barely suppressing Shieldred's network, which is more effective against non-Phyrexians. We see these spy network strengths in Jin's newest card. Here he enters Kamigawa, where tech is power. Jin doubles his own and halves that of others. This means that he keeps his opponents down by halting their progress, while being very fast with his own. Jin is the perfect antagonist against Kamigawa at this point. He even spies on Shieldred herself, using completed drakes to check out her seas at least. I believe that it might be a tad too dangerous to actually cross the swamps with dragons that can be resurrected by the Spider Queen, so Jin keeps his monitors safe on his shoreline. One last strength, which is that Jin was the first with the ability to turn planeswalkers complete, and he now has the overly strong Tamiyo seemingly on his side. She might, with her own personality, like to stay clear of the Praetors, though, and she might have her own vision of perfection. But with Jin's power of mind manipulation, perhaps he's altered Tamiyo to believe in his vision. Tamiyo, meanwhile, will keep gathering stories about her new family and find her own truth. But that was it for Jin's powers. The last 3 will be next, but might have to wait a little bit for after the release of the Phyrexian set. Stay sane.